Hello everyone, this is Samirian, and in this video we're going to talk about a way to speed up your metronome in a matter of speaking so that you can play songs faster than you can using the default settings of the metronome. Now, to follow this video you don't really need to read sheet music, it's mostly going to be logic we're doing, but it does help to make sense if you do speak a little bit of music. We're going to look first at this metronome here. And time bar duration, the minimum we can get is 4 seconds for a time bar with a maximum of 16 impulses per time bar. And so what that means is that basically every quarter second we can do an impulse out of the metronome. Can be used for other things, but it works really great with a music toy. Now, the disadvantage with that, and I've heard a lot of people say, why would you need to go faster than that? Because literally that's 240 impulses every minute, which is pretty fast. And I've heard people say, well, that's 240 beats per minute. Not actually correct. And I'm going to drop a button here, and I'll show you why that's not correct. And tell it to start cycle. And I'm going to go into this metronome. I've already put in a few notes, but I'm going to turn this audible tick on for a second here. And I'm going to push the button. We're going to see it's going to be booting along at a pretty good tick. Pretty fast. Now the thing is, it's not 240 beats per minute because a beat is technically a quarter note. And so only if you're using every impulse on the metronome as a quarter note is it 240 beats per minute. If anywhere in your song you need a 1/8 note, you have to start separating those quarter notes and leaving a blank impulse in between them. And when you do that, you've dropped the speed of your song down to 120 beats per minute. And that, of course, only if we're using 4/4 time, but most songs are 4/4 time, so I'm going to assume we're using 4/4 time. Now let's say you need a 1/16th note in your song. Well, now you have to space your quarter notes 4 impulses away from each other in order to make room for 1/16th notes, which means at that point you're only doing 60 beats per minute. 120 beats per minute, that can probably pass for a song. 60 beats per minute, it better be a slow song. And if you've got 1/16th notes, it's probably not a slow song. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to double the speed of that these metronomes are firing impulses, and we're going to do it using 2 metronomes. And so basically we're going to increase it from 240 impulses a minute to 480 impulses a minute. So even at 1/16th notes in your song, you'll still have 120 beats per minute. If you only have 1/8 notes, you can go all the way up to 240 beats per minute. So this is going to increase our speed fairly good, and I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to do it and explain it as we're going. So what we're going to do, and I developed this system back in 2.0 when time delayer, the fastest you could get a time delayer to fire off was every second. Now they've increased it by 4 times now, so you can actually do time layers set to a quarter second. But that's also the speed that a metronome goes, so a quarter second is not going to help us in this case. So I'm going to show you the circuit I designed back in 2.0 that is still a whole lot faster than a time delayer. So we're going to use a logic gate and a counter. And in essence what we're going to do is we're going to send signals out to the counter to increase its count. And every time the count increases, we're going to send an input back to this logic gate to keep the cycle going again and again and again. And then by changing the target count on a counter, we can actually design a system that will fire off a signal every time this counter reaches a certain target count, and it's going to be a lot faster than time delayer. So how I do that is, in essence, I have it set up so that any output from this logic gate is going to increment by 1 this counter. And this counter, every time the count changes, is going to send an input to the logic gate, which is going to have a constant loop going here. So in order to turn this circuit off, I have to close this logic gate. But because I have to close it, I also set it up so that if you open the logic gate, it also increments that counter by 1. And this way I have a really simple method where I just send open to this logic gate and it will start the circuit every time. It doesn't matter if this logic gate is open or closed. And that's all there really is to it. Let's just make sure the visible display is on. And we're actually going to run a little test here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this guy up so that when impulse 1 fires, it's going to open this logic gate. And when impulse 2 fires, it's going to close this logic gate. So what I'm doing here is in between those two impulses, I'm going to check to see how many times this little circuit will run between those two impulses. So if I push this button, that counter should shoot up. It ran 10 times in a quarter second. And let's just put a button down here and reset that counter. And we're going to try it again just to make sure we've got a good average going. To reset that counter. So we're going to reset that counter. And we're going to fire off this button again. And again, we got a count of 10. It ran 10 times in that quarter second. So what we can do is we can say we want the second metronome to start running halfway between impulse 1 and impulse 2 of the first metronome. And since we know it takes 10 loops of this system here to do a quarter second, we want it to go 0.125 seconds, or halfway between those two impulses. And because it went to 10, that means if I set this target count to 5, which is halfway between that 10 seconds, I'm going to turn this visible display off, and I'm going to reset on target reach just because it makes this whole system run a whole lot smoother. I don't have to hit reset every time. But this system is now going to loop 5 times, and then once it's done, I'm going to tell it to close itself. So once you hit target reached, it is going to turn itself off, but it's also going to fire off this second metronome. And I don't want to hear any music yet, so I'm going to turn this volume down. Might hear something still. And I'm going to turn the ticks on the second metronome for now. So there we go. Now I don't need impulse 2 closing that logic gate anymore, but I still need impulse 1 opening it, because impulse 1 is going to play. It will start this circuit. This circuit will play, go 5 times, which we've decided is about 0.125 seconds, and then it will start this second metronome. So we're going to listen to the audible ticks and see it should be going about twice as fast now. And let's check that out. It is going a whole lot faster now. So let us just see how fast it's going here. We're going to turn those ticks off. Now the thing is, right now we have a fairly empty toy box. Once this toy box starts to fill up, this counter system may take a little bit longer to play. So you may find that your music is now playing a little offbeat. And if that happens, just drop the target count of this counter down by 1, test it, see if it works. If it's still a little off, drop it down by another 1. You can adjust that target count. The lower you make the count, the quicker this circuit is going to finish and fire. And as the toy box gets fuller, it may take longer for this circuit to reach the same number that it was before, and therefore you may have to adjust it once the toy box starts to get full. But for now, we should be good. Now I'm going to crank this volume back up. And I've put a few notes on each metronome, and let's see here. Oh, that's actually playing so fast that I should probably adjust the duration of the notes here. And we'll try it again. There we go. Those notes are firing really fast. So that is how you double the speed of a metronome. If you really wanted, you could add a third metronome in there, a second one of these circuits, and do maybe a target count of 3, starts up the next one, and then the next one's first impulse starts up the second counting circuit, and its target count of 3 fires off the third metronome, and in that way you could triple the speed of your music. Now, if you're going to that extent, it's going to be a really fast song, but this is how you effectively double the speed of a metronome so you can start to do songs that are a little quicker. So again, this has been Samirian, and this has been a video on how to double the speed of your metronome. I hope it's been helpful, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.